devotional from Pastor Gary.
Okay, great to be with you guys. So today is about finances and the mission field and raising support. As we prepared for this week, I have interviewed maybe 5 or 6 different missionaries about finances. And I want to say this about Greater Grace and missions is that if we listen to our missionaries and their testimonies of the way that God has used finances in their lives, how deep of trust it has caused them to see the faithfulness of God, the character of God. And as I was actually talking to Annetta this morning, in Matthew chapter 5, and thinking of the Beatitudes, just the poor in spirit, and being poor in our spirit really gives us a deep sense of how God wants to provide, a deep sense of having an open hand from the provider, from the God who is faithful, from the God who knows how to give us his riches. He opens, when we become poor, our eyes are opened. Maybe we see somebody relationally poor, maybe somebody that is, in terms of their identity, poor, maybe somebody that is poor in terms of their education. It gives us eyes, and we actually see. At Greater Grace, you could say, we don't have a large budget for missions. We have a budget for missions, but we don't send missionaries out with a guaranteed, salary. And we have a very unique way that has developed, evolved, where missionaries are trusting God for their finances, and we have many unique ways. Every missionary in Greater Grace has a unique means of trusting God for their finances. We don't have a missions department that guarantees you X amount of money. So I want to just read this verse, and this is a God telling Moses, and for Moses to tell the people of Israel just the way God's economy works. And it's really beautiful here, and this is in Deuteronomy chapter 11. Okay, it says this in verse 10, "For the land where you go in to possess it is not as the land of Egypt." It doesn't work the same way as Egypt. Egypt was a fertile ground. It had fertile soil. It was on the delta of the Nile, and it was an agrarian society, and that was Egypt. But there's another way that God is going to provide for the Jews when they enter into Israel. From whence you came out, and from where you sowed your seed and waterest it with thy foot as a garden of herbs. That's the way they did it in Egypt. But at verse 11, "But the land where you go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rains of heaven." And it was a dry land. It was a land that wasn't so fertile, but it was a land where God was going to provide rains that actually came from heaven. God was going to show his faithfulness. And this is prosperity. We think of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. Just the godliness with contentment is great gain. And as we talk about finances today, we're going to glory in the faithfulness of God, the way that God actually works. And it says the land, verse 11, but the land whither you go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven. And that gives us perspective of how our God can supply. And thinking of, and I'm not making this spiritual because I want this to be practical, but as I spoke to our missionaries, there was a sense of fragrance in their lives, and from the way that they have trusted God for finances, it caused an incredible depth. It was like a form. It was like a form of, you could say, fasting, and from something that you get normally, by the sweat of your brow, the work of your hands, but there's a sense of seeing people fast and seeing God actually literally give provisions, like Elijah. Like the ravens actually did take care of him. Christ sent out his disciples, 2 by 2. It was like they weren't to take the script or money. They were going to be in people's houses, and this isn't like a crazy way to live, even though it may look crazy. And this is not a irresponsible way to actually live. And I'm not trying to make us be irresponsible here. But as I listened to the missionaries, I was just amazed at the stories. And it says this in verse 13 of Deuteronomy. It says, "And it shall come to pass, if you will hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I will give you the rain of your land in due season." It creates this dependency on the rain from God. It creates in us this incredible sensitivity to God, to listen to his commandments, to put our ear on the heart of God. And it's like you can hear just the motives. When you put your ear on the heart of God, you can feel God's motives. You can feel God's compassion. You can almost sense God's next step. You see what God desires. And I want to say that about the history of our missionaries, and also about the future of our missionaries, and the way our missionaries are right now, incredibly diligent to hearken to the voice of God, and they have seen the rains come down upon their lives and seeing God provide for them. One interesting, we've spoken to many different people this week. Some people said it was even embarrassing to ask for money. I know when I was to go out on the mission field, I just remember this one thing that this is kind of the old thing to write a newsletter. But I wrote a newsletter when I was started with Campus Crusade, and they gave me this format to write out, and I think some people gave just because I gave them a letter, and maybe even guilt, and sometimes we feel that way. Oh, I have to give to them. They asked, and sometimes it's really hard to even ask people for money when you want to trust God for it. But I'll never forget this one guy. He was my basketball coach. He was the assistant basketball coach, and he gave me $100. And in the note that he wrote this. He said, "Thanks for asking." And I've never forgotten that. And just what the connection of people here, and you guys are missionaries there. People here love to be a part of what you are doing there. And I don't mean that about asking. I love our church, and we can develop it more, just how people are involved in actually giving to you. It's an amazing blessing to see. I work in the missions office, to see people's sacrifices, the way people give here for you guys, and the way they are connected to the work there. How do you raise support? We're going to talk a lot about that today, but just this last note that I'll say before we kind of kick things off here is it's about love, and it's about the sacrifices of love and the incredible fragrance of your guys' lives as you have laid down your life. I like I was saying before in Deuteronomy, what is it? Deuteronomy is in, let's see. It's in Daniel chapter 3. Yeah, it would be Daniel chapter 3, where the Hebrew boys, they went into the fire and they said, hey, if our God doesn't deliver me, they had a persuasion of the faithfulness of their God. Hey, if he doesn't deliver me, that's okay with me. But when those boys, they came out with boys with the fourth man, and there's the essence of God was all over them, but there was no smell of the smoke on them. And I think of that with the faithfulness of God and our mission here. So it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to see the testimonies, the fragrance that is like perfuming is escaping from the lives of our missionaries as they trust God. And we have missionaries. There's some people that have never asked, from missionaries that never ask anyone for anything, to missionaries that have jobs and they support themselves 100%. We have the whole gamut here, and that's called Greater Grace Missions. So today, as we talk about, how do you raise support, I've got some testimonies here. You guys are going to have some testimonies, and I'm looking forward to this as we get edified as we talk about the subject.
Yeah, it's a great topic. It's one that often in the missions office we have individually with people, but there's never really been large conferences or large conversations on a corporate level. And I think one of the reasons why is because historically, there's a lot of variety in how we do support ourselves. We have some guys that support themselves entirely by themselves. They either have a job that allows them to work on the field, or they have a job that they can come home and work and raise money and make enough money to support them for their whole year. And then there's some that work part-time. Then there's some that don't work at all, and they completely get support, 100% supported by someone else. There's some that even do their own business while they're on the field, which helps support. There's a lot of variety there. I'd like us to think there's a juxtaposition here of money is a resource. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 12, money is a resource. So how do I source the resource of money? Like any other resource as a missionary, it's a resource that helps me do what I want to do. I know, Brittany, you're in Turkey, and you're also single. And I know that a lot of times it's a lot harder for singles to raise finances for the mission. And you've recently been out for a while now. How did you approach it when you considered the mission field?
Yeah, I would say when I was first getting ready to go, I mean, when you're in Baltimore, you have a few meetings that you have to, have before you're sent out. And one of those, in one of those meetings, they talk about, do you have enough monthly support or monthly income, to live where you're going to live, basically. And so that was like my first, I had thought about money before, but that was the first light bulb moment where I was like, oh yeah, I have to make sure I have enough money every month to live there. I had come from working a full-time job and saving as much as I could the whole year leading up to leaving.
That's a great point.
And then, the convention that we had the summer before I left, kind of seeing that as my first round of collecting support and then going from there.
Let me ask you a couple questions. The first one, what a lot of missionaries do that first go out, they try to save a lot of money for the first year, and then that savings is gone in the first year. So what was your next step the next year?
Yeah, actually, through that convention, the convention that we had, it was my first year of kind of running the booth mostly by myself with a little bit of help from Roger and Liz, my team leaders. And that week of convention really helped me get get our like vision out there to a lot of people. We were, you're put in front of a lot of people. They come through to see what everybody's selling, see what you have. And I would say that exposure helped. Some people started supporting me just from that week alone.
Wow.
Not just the money we raised in selling things, but from, putting ourselves out there. We made a video and we introduced people to our church and, what we're doing here in Turkey after that first year. We had all this video material and we made a cool video, and that I think helped people see what we're doing. And it got people on board to support. And I kind of have personally, I have a testimony that happened my first year, because I was kind of under what I needed to have, but I was still just going by faith. And an individual had actually decided to write a pretty large check the week before I was leaving. It was completely out of nowhere. I didn't really know the person very well, besides that they were in our ministry, and they had a conversation. It was on their heart. And I would say most of my support that first and part of the second year was from one individual.
Wow. Pastor Gary, you mentioned a lot about sharing the vision. I think I like what he said, in the sense, if you take both thoughts, sometimes it's a combination of me asking, and I want to use a different word, not so much me asking you to support, but I want to lead into me sharing a vision. I know for my own self, when I went out, it was more along the lines of, I didn't feel comfortable directly asking people, will you support me? So I felt more comfortable with, okay, I'm going and this is what God has put on my heart. And some folks will have a vision for where you're going, and some folks will have a vision for you personally. Doesn't matter where you go. But I like the fact that both of you talked about sharing, saying something. There is a body of people that believe that you shouldn't share your vision or your need. And I don't think it's sharing your need as much as it is sharing your vision, and then let God speak to people, and I think newsletters and prayer cards do that. And that's a great idea for you if you're considering the mission field. If you're listening to us right now, you're not doing these things so much informational as much as you're doing them with sharing a vision. It's just like when you go soul winning and you go to a conference and you talk to people about what are you doing? What are you doing? What is God doing in your life? Well, he's leading me this way, right? I know that's a big thing, is sharing. You said you had testimonies for other folks who also.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, that I personally did is visit churches. And it's like, yeah, you didn't ask for money, and you weren't even going there. It was just like you kind of came home and you visited a few churches and you told them what you were doing. And I personally, I had a hard time asking for money. I didn't know how to do it. At first I was totally supported by people and by people, but not really, because I didn't have nearly enough money. So I got a job on the mission field, and then I realized I needed more. And then I got a job, and I worked actually for my family business, and that wasn't enough still. And then I still needed support. And there was an incredible balance there. Like, am I working or am I a missionary? And it was really a head game that went on in my mind. But I remember this about the mission field, and I remember getting that, I'll get to your question in a second, but getting that letter from Greater Grace, that email of who supported me, it was so holy. My wife, I said, Kathy, you have to open that. Like, there are people in there that have supported us. And this is what we're going to live on. Are we going to have enough or not? But you see the people, and you would be so thankful for them. And the amount would shake you. Sometimes you'd rejoice and be like, but sometimes you wouldn't have enough, and it would shake you, and you would go to God. I remember open up those letters. I wouldn't open the email because my wife kind of took care of the finances, and I would ask her, and then it was just this time a month where we just adjusted ourselves to God wherever we were at, and we had to find provisions from God, or we were, just so thankful, or we were so trusting God's faithfulness. It was an incredible, each month was a different position, where we positioned ourselves before God and our need. And what did there are people here that said they were supported, the people that I interviewed this week, they were supported by their family. Their family got behind them, and their family saw their need. And this person said their family became extremely blessed, and even financially, because they were behind this person's vision, and they supported them, and he saw this faithfulness of God to the family that was actually supporting him. You know what people did many times? Annetta did this when I asked her, but people, when I asked them about finances, they laughed. It was the first reaction when you ask missionaries about finances. They laugh. They don't know where to start. There's one missionary I spoke to in Western Europe, and he spoke about, he's working right now full time. And when he's working full time, he has so many questions about his ministry, how much more he could do. His wife is working also. And he has this question about, what is he doing here? Is he just working? How much more could he do? Another person has recently lost a main supporter, but he's going back to his country, and he's trusting God for his finances. Like, these are another person, like you said, they refuse to ask anybody for money, to never bring that up as a topic, like almost like a George Mueller.
Yeah.
And they have seen the faithfulness of God in their life. And they have seen incredible, beautiful, strong provisions, financial provisions for God in their life. So we see that whole gamut, Pastor Ronaldo.
Wow. So far what I've gotten, as I'm thinking for myself, I'm putting myself as a missionary, and I'm on the field, and I'm watching our program this morning, and I'm asking myself, okay, give me something that I can think about and say, okay, this is going to help me make choices differently concerning my finances. And I've got so far, number one, share my vision.
Right.
Make sure I'm visiting people, including my family, share my vision, talk about my vision. That's a lot easier to do because that's on your heart, as opposed to asking specifically for money. But also, if you're led by God, also ask. Number two, consider the option of employment where you are, like Pastor Gary did. Maybe where I am, there's an opportunity to work part-time or full-time. And in some cases, maybe if I'm entrepreneurial, I may start a business of some kind that allows me to support myself on the field. Number three, consider a budget. And why is that important? Because like Brittany said, she was asked the question, how much money will you need? You don't know about your finances until you know what's needed. And a lot of times I find that budget is floating. Like, normally in the missions office, someone says, okay, how much money do they need to survive a month in this country? I always pad 25% because that number tends to float with exchange rates. So if they say it's 300, I say, okay, this person needs 400. So a budget helps because that gives you boundaries. And then number four, the fourth thing I got so far from us is understand that this is an opportunity of faith. You cannot budget out the faith. You can't plan out and strategize the faith. There's going to be an element of trusting God in this. Even when the support comes in, there's an element of trusting God in this. And I don't want to schedule God out of my finances. I want to be buried in my finances. So those are four things so far I've gotten that can really help us as missionaries. If you're listening to us and you're thinking about missions, if you're on the field and you're looking at your finances and it's hard to see how things are going to go forward, these are some things that can help. Annetta, let me ask you this question. Describe to me your toughest missionary experience involving finances and how God got you through that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it. Was it for me?
Yeah, it was for you. Yeah, describe your
toughest.
Your toughest. Because I know your situation is different than Brittany's.
Yeah. Okay. The toughest maybe was a period when I think Satan used it to kind of attack me on the level of like projections, like that there's no one behind you or no one with you. And that was kind of a period. And so it went from practical parts to more like a spiritual attack or something. But that was probably the toughest. Not even like not having money or something, but just mentally or spiritually handling it, and knowing and going through it that God is with you, and not it's not about people or something. And your second question about like my situation compared to Brittany's, yeah. So I think when Pastor Gary asked me, I also laughed because I was like, okay. Then he only asked me about finances, not really about how to raise support, because I'm not really sure I know how to raise support, or I ever really. So when I first left, I also left just trusting God. I kind of really believe that reading my Bible, that God can take care of me. And the first when I first moved to Turkey, actually, I did have enough to pay my rent, but even that came out of the blue from someone who heard that I'm going and wants to help me. And I also kind of put aside for myself. So I really, the beginning was really just going more like the George Mueller style and not asking. And I really appreciate that time because of how much trust it created for me to trust God. And then when I moved to this other country, then I did try to kind of send some letters, but also just seeing that people who have the heart for what you're doing is such a blessing. So that even when I sent out a few letters, I didn't really do it in my life too much. It was only a month or something. But it really blessed me how people joined. Yeah, what you were saying, that they joined the vision, and knowing that even that went by faith in a sense, that God put it in their hearts. It was never really our part. And then lately I've been working, so I kind of experienced all these things.
Wow. So you've done it all.
Yeah.
What's funny, I think, is the longer you're in the field, the way you get support evolves. I think maybe the beginning was you worked a job all summer, you raised enough support, you bought a ticket and you bought it. Then later on, as you're the missionary, you're not able to save as much money, you look for employment. People find out. Usually, I found with my family, your first year, no one takes you seriously. Oh, you're just trying to find yourself. You're just going out there for a minute. You'll be back. And then the longer you're out there, like, okay, this person's for real. They're like actually doing this. They're still out there. So then more folks, because a lot of times people don't support you because they're ignorant that you're not, they didn't even know you were going. I had guys say to me, where have you been? I've been on the field. Where? I didn't even know. It's like, that's why I think that idea of sharing your vision is so important. It's not so much asking, give me, but more like, God is leading me, and maybe God might lead you to support. I think there's this balance between the opportunity of faith, George Mueller style, versus the responsibility of stewardship. I don't want to be reckless. I can recall my first year on the field, I left Baltimore with plane ticket round trip and $200. I didn't have any support. I was supposed to have a life insurance policy. I didn't fill that out at all. I gave an empty envelope to Pastor Guy Duff. Didn't fill it out at all. I went out there with no insurance, $200, and no support at all. Pastor Billy came through it and saved me about 4 months in. He got me support from a few different people. I was highly reckless. But the longer I got out, the more I recognized, okay, I'm going to have to be responsible as a steward of my call. And part of the stewardship of my call is that there's resources I'm accountable for. So I can't just be reckless like this because I'll lead people into the same thing. But I don't want to ignore the opportunity of faith to trust God to see what God's going to do. And I think for everybody's experience, there's a balance between these two things, the responsibility of stewardship and the opportunity of faith. And money is one of the greatest areas because it's part and parcel of everything that we do. I don't want to be so faith-oriented that I'm careless about my finances. And I don't want to be so financially focused that I don't walk by faith. And I think the big challenge for us is, okay, I'm a missionary. This is what I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what God has called me to do. This is not just to visit. I'm not just here for a year to see what God's going to do. This is it. So then my whole life begins different. And it's funny, you see missionaries when they come home, they even live different here in their home countries. They're frugal with their money. They don't go places. They don't do things. And it's not because they're cheap, but they're used to being very, very diligent about how they handle money. Pastor Grant, let me ask you this question. If you could give an advice or warning about raising support, what would that be?
I would say jealousy.
Wow.
I remember a time I didn't have money for my kids to actually get a piece of candy when some other kids were able to get some candy. I mean, not able to buy a piece of candy.
Wow.
And just how I had to process that and not be jealous of the other people that had more money on the mission field than me, and to find God's contentment. And I'm not competing for money. I'm called to something, and I believed that God would be faithful. And one of the greatest things I've learned is to talk it over with my wife and say, hey, it doesn't look good, but we're going. And with raising finances, it's not the beginning and the end of your call.
Yes.
You don't look at that. You don't look at that in August and say, look, we don't have enough money to go back to Germany. We believe God is faithful, and we are going. And you become extremely budgetary. That's an incredible word. And I think it has affected even my life today. The money that I can't spend on something, thinking of like, you don't know how the ravens are going to supply, or you don't know how God is going to supply your needs. And you're very conscious of how you spend your money, because you're looking to the God of heaven to bring rains, on you. So as you raise money, or as we raise money, look to God from heaven. Work. I mean, what did I do? I taught English. I taught mathematics. I tutored in a school. I found this employment for myself. I tried my own business. That didn't work. It took way too much time. One thing is that even if I didn't communicate to someone that supported me about raising support, I was so thankful for their lives. I had a lady, she's in our church today with very little money, but she sent me a sizable gift, and I knew her what she receives. It's very little, and she gave. Be so thankful for the smallest $10 that somebody gives you, and know they have given that out of their heart. And you just be thankful for that. Hey, that wasn't big enough. Just be thankful for what you have, and know that God will supply. I mean, those are some things that I learned.
Can we piggyback that for a second? Relationships. When you think about money, you don't want a relationship between the people you don't want the relationship that you have with people to be about money.
Yeah.
I have found that in my experience for myself and for other missionaries, the most faithful supporters that you have are the ones that there's a connection with, there's a relationship with, it goes beyond money. And you'll find that most folks that give toward God's heart and God's vision for your life and your calling are guys that had relationships with you before the money, and even when they can't afford to give, the relationships afterwards, because that's what it's about. They're not giving to pay your bills. They're giving to you. They're connected to you. They're supporting with you. And I want to say this, that in our history in the missions office, the conversation of so-and-so has to come off the mission field because there's no money. We don't have those kind of conversations. God is amazing. Our ministry is amazing. I talk to guys in other ministries all the time. They say, how does that little church support so many missionaries? I said, well, because it's number one, it's an amazing church, but number two, God is also good and God gives creativity. So let's not remove the creativity in it. It's like I said, as you on the field, God gives you crazy creativity. I remember one year, this is my wife won't mind me saying this now, but it was October, and I think my support for that month was like I think it was $40. I remember driving her to a parking lot, and she had gotten some clothes from her parents, Katangi material, and she sold the clothes out of the car, and that's how we ate that month. It was 2 months like that, actually. I think she remembers. It was 2 months. I had a little bit of gas in the car. We drove to the parking lot. She sold Chitangis out of the back. People that knew us came and bought them, and then that's how we ate. You just get creative. You look at what you can do. It's Genesis, Exodus 4. What is that in your hand? You know, God just gives you creativity. But the thing I cherish the most, like Pastor Gary said, people that are partnering with you financially, that relationship is so close.
Wow.
It's so precious. They're the first people you look for. They're the people that their faces are in their mind. I used to do a lot of newsletters, but this generation doesn't do it. Now, when I was on the field, I phone calls to people. I would connect with people, relationships at convention. They're the people you run to. And it's just like, yeah, we're in this together. Finance is just one of the ways we're connected, but I don't want money to be the only way they're connected. And part of my responsibility, I think, as a missionary, when I'm on the field or when I'm in a work, is that little report, like he said, is gold. That's like seriously gold. The ones we used to get, I used to pray over mine, like, God, bless their house, bless their businesses, bless what they put their hands to. Thank you for what they've done. I've had guys make that phone call that all missionaries dread a little bit when they call you or they email you, say, I'm no longer able to support you. You kind of cringe. You usually get that phone call in January or February. It comes in and they're like, okay, you're not going to be able to do it anymore. And the first thing is God has to humble you and say, I always say this, thank you for all that you've done. You made it happen. Thank you. Thank you. And it's never a thought about, I'm sad that you're not supporting me. I'm thankful that you have supported me. I mean, it's been amazing. And a lot of times what's amazing about that is God sometimes can even bring that supporter back. But sometimes we get angry. Oh, so-and-so stopped supporting me. Well, God didn't stop supporting you. God is still involved in it. And I think when it comes to finances, I want our relation to be more than money. Because the churches that are supported, the people that are supported by Baltimore, the relationship is more than money. Relationship is everything. I don't want the relationship currency of our relationship to be currency. It shouldn't be money. It should be more than that. And sometimes you have people that support you that stop supporting you and they don't want to see you. They look away. Oh, I can't believe I stopped supporting. Things happen, right? Life happens. But we're in this together. But the money is a resource, but it's not our only resource. And I'm just encouraged by the faithfulness of our people to give and to go, and to give and go. This is an interesting thing, Brittany. I'm not sure if you've experienced this yet, or Annetta, if you've experienced this, or you, Pastor Gary, but a lot of our people that receive support also support.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard, I know I did. When I was on the field, I supported, but I also supported other missionaries. It's like, how can I ask someone to do something I don't do myself? And a lot of times it was by faith. Like, okay, we don't have a lot, but we can help so-and-so, so let's help so-and-so on the field for a season. It keeps it in your heart. It keeps it warm. It makes you appreciate more. Do you ever thought about that, supporting other missionaries while you're on the field, being supported?
I'm going to take that as a really good piece of advice.
Well, Brittany, I'll tell you right now, every year that I did that, God was always faithful to me as I did that. And I also took it personal. Like, this was like, okay, Ronaldo, really? Okay, yeah, you can trust God to bring support to you, but can you trust God to be a vessel? Can you pour out? And I said, I can't afford to pour out. Okay. It's like with tithing. I can't afford to tithe. I like that sacrificial giving as a missionary. I love it. In fact, that's why even when I came home, it was continue to support, because I believe in it. Because I know how it feels to be the other person. I've been that person. So I have a special compassion for them. Like when I used to work at a restaurant as a waiter, I understood about tips. So when I go out, I don't care how much money I have, I tip because I know the life that they have. I know how hard it is to be a waiter and be a waitress and how they survive on tips. So I tip because I've been that person. I can identify. But yeah, it's a great piece of advice, Brittany. And on the other two, it's great advice. Are you writing it down, Brittany? No, but it's important. I think again, I'm going to rehearse those again. Share your vision. Be a visionary that talks about your vision. When they used to ask William Carey all the time, they would talk to William Carey, and all he would say is India, India, India. It was always on his mouth. It was always out of his mouth. It was always in his mind. He was talking about it. Share your vision. A lot of folks would love to get behind what you're doing, but don't know you're doing it. They don't know what's in your heart. Share what's in your heart. Number two, consider all your options. Besides working to save, consider maybe I can work somehow, maybe I can do my own business, but consider all your options, which is also like anything creative God could give. Number three, we said a budget is important. And you find out there's a list of things that you want, and then there's a list of things that you need, and then you get even more narrow to the things that God allows. And there might be some things you need, but God doesn't allow. But a budget creates boundaries and creates discipline. And it makes you a good steward of whatever God gives you. And also, when you talk to people and you share your vision, they're going to ask you a question. They're going to ask you, what is your budget? You say, oh, I'm saving money for the mission field. How much do you need? Oh, I don't know. I don't think you're preparing. You're not prepared for the blessing of God. That's not being prepared. Wisdom, stewardship. And then number four, we said, understanding the balance between the opportunity of faith versus the responsibility of stewardship. That little relationship right there is what goes on in our mind. No matter how much money we need, and no matter how much money goes out, or no matter how much money comes in, I've got to have that balance, because otherwise, I'll be careless, or I'll be too controlled. I'll be too stressed. It'll be too administrative, you know. But I think that's the key, Pastor Gary.
What would you say, Pastor Naldo, about, say, a family, a young family today? You have children. You know, we have two. I'll just critique this a little bit. We have two young girls. They're single. We all know that we're responsible to ourselves. We can be a little bit reckless, and we are accountable to our own recklessness at the end of the day. We have a family. Seb is here in the audience. He's got two kids, one on the way. And say he would want to go on to the mission field. What do you tell somebody? You know, he's in Greater Grace. He's a prime candidate to be a missionary. Him and his wife and his family. What would somebody like that do if they? What suggestions do we have for them at Greater Grace?
I would say, first of all, we're going into this as a family. I mean, if you're already a family and you're going into the mission field, I kind of got a family on the mission field, so that's a whole different conversation. My finances just changed. Everything changed. The way I lived as a single missionary versus a married missionary versus a family with kids, I had different choices. Things just changed. Things got a bit more, I got less reckless. I got more organized in my finances. I got more creative, number one. But I would say if I'm a family and I would like to go on the mission field, every aspect of the vision we share as a family. We are doing this. We are praying for this as a family. We are talking about this. We're making choices in our life now to streamline for that. A lot of times people go on the mission field and there's no changes to their life at all here. And at the last minute, they start trying to put things together when really, okay, we have a goal in a year or we have a goal in 2 years to go on the mission field. So we're not going to spend money on that because we're going on the mission field in 2 years. We're not going to take on extra debt. We're going on the mission. We start making choices as a family. Maybe we do crazy things like, okay, we're going to sacrifice Christmas for plane tickets. We do crazy things like, really, we're doing this. We are the family, and we are making sacrifices, head to bottom, left to right. We're making sacrifices. We're going to take last year's clothes and wear them this year. We're going to make sacrifices and choices, but we do it as a unit. And then we start saving forward. We say as a family, okay, we need $7,000 as a family to go on the mission field. Okay, maybe we do crazy stuff like thermometers in the house and different things and we all make choices. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We might do something reckless. We might take our kids out of school and homeschool them and take that tuition and put it towards the mission field. We just get creative as a family. And then as a unit, we start building towards that goal. We pray for it. We have devotionals about it. We talk about the place we're going. We talk about it as a family. But that's how I would begin, and build towards that so that all of us know that we are doing this with God together. That's important, I think, as a family. I think if you're on the field and suddenly you get a family, like you get married on the field, a lot of our missionaries get married on the field or have kids on the field. That's a dramatic thing because you've got to think about how you're going to feed that, how you're going to finance that. It's a whole lot different. I know for me, on the field, I made some drastic choices in where I lived. I needed to get a bigger place. I needed to get a different place. A lot of single missionaries are living like in a room. They got a small little situation going on, but then all of a sudden they get married. Okay, now I've got to think bigger. I got to think a place that's going to house me and my spouse, and I got to think about that. And the food budget goes up, right? The food budget goes up. The lodging budget goes up. Some cases, transportation goes up. As I'm raising a kid on the field, education becomes an issue. Will I homeschool? Will we use national schools here? These are all questions I got to walk through with God by faith. And I have to say, okay, God, if you're adding these things to my life, there's a provision for that. And I've got to be wise with the provision. But we have a lot of great families that have gone out. The Armins went out. The Armins went out as a couple. They came back. They went back out again with kids. And they went out, and it was the same thing. They made a plan. They worked the plan as a family, as a unit. They did it together. They went on the field together. Then they had kids, and they continued. The Speeds did the same thing. They went out as a family. Just different families have done that. It can be done. Our ministry has a lot of families that have gone out and done it. The Post have done it. A lot have done it. It just requires two things. It requires team, the family unit as team, and to start living like a team and thinking like a team long before you go. And then a plan that God gives and God orchestrates, and we just make that happen. Because I think that here's what Satan is always trying to tell you what you can't do. I just got married, can't go in the field. I just had a kid, can't go in the field. I don't have money, can't go in the field. My experience in the missions has never been we've told someone you can't go in the field because you don't have money. We've never said that. We found a way. God's found a way. It's never been money. Money's never been the issue. And to be honest with you, coming off the field, money's never been the issue. We found a way. I had a missionary with me one time, and we'll get into this next Monday about managing your support. They came up to me on a team in Zambia and said, Pastor Ronaldo, I got to go home. I don't have enough money. And my first thought was, what do you mean? He said, I don't have enough money. I said, let's have a cup of coffee, look at your budget. They showed me the budget, and I said, okay. You have enough money to survive here, but when the team goes out for donuts and coffee in the afternoon to spend all this money, you can't afford to do that because you're not living for them socially. You've got to have a measure of discipline about what God has given. You've got to be a good steward. So then that person made a bunch of changes and they stayed on the mission field. But sometimes I have to have that measure of discipline, that measure of organization in my life. There's structure. There is the mystical, but there's also a bit of the mechanical. There's got to be an organization, a structure where, okay, I've got to make, like he said, he talked to his wife about candy. I remember I've had conversations with my wife, okay, we can't afford to do that. Or we can't afford to do that, but that's okay. We're missionaries. We're not missionaries because of what we can afford, and we're not missionaries because of what we can't afford. We're missionaries because we've been called by God, and God supplies what we need. And I have to really believe that as a family and as a couple. That would be my thoughts about that.
Yeah, beautiful. Pastor Ronald, I became a good cook because of the mission field.
Really?
Because we were out of food, out of money. In my wife's idea, we were out of food. But I saw food in the cabinet, and she had no recipe to make with the food, but I would make food that would taste good from what was in the cabinet. And that was one of my favorite, those were like the kids' favorite meals.
Wow.
And so it's the resourcefulness. I cut people's hair, I remember. I loved it. The guy gave me some money. I had a shears, so I cut somebody's hair for money. You know what I mean? I moved Christmas trees in the winter for money. Another two things that were incredible. And I'm just saying, like, this is, like, one guy from a church saw me. He came to visit, and he became one of my, and I didn't even ask him. He just saw our lives and he says, I want to support you guys. And there were people in our church that supported us. But just think, if you're a pastor and your church isn't growing, say, and it's not able to support you, this is also like, you want the church to grow so it can support you, but it can't support you. It's not big enough. And there's like, oh, if I could just get over that threshold where I could be full time.
Yeah.
And like, we have questions like that. I just would love to be full time. Why can't I? So maybe you just talk a bit about that, Pastor Ronaldo.
Okay, the last moments that we have, a lot of pastors are bivocational. They're actually not the lion's share of churches, particularly overseas, cannot afford to financially support completely a pastor. So many pastors have to be bivocational. They've got to work a job part-time or full-time to support themselves. I would say this, that calls on the wisdom and counsel from a covering, but also too the creativity of the Holy Spirit. I know guys that start internet cafes, they start counseling sessions, they start all kind of ways to raise finances, because whether you have the support or not does not dictate the call. I think a lot of pastors, they want a traditional life, or maybe they had a different vision of their life where they would serve God full time, and how much could they do? Well, that's possibly true. But I don't have to wait for that. It's like I don't have to wait till the church can do that. I can serve God in the time that I have, and I just have to labor a little bit. I just have to be more aggressive with my time, and it's going to cost me something. It's going to cost me something. This is not going to get handed to me where I walk into a pastorate and I step into a pulpit and there's the salary waiting for me, and some of it's just the ministry. It's just the work of the ministry. It's like, okay, it's not the job of a pastor, it's the call of a pastor. And with that, it means that, okay, maybe I have to work, maybe I have to get a second job, maybe I make choices, maybe I do things differently, and down the road, God can change things, or maybe God doesn't change things. Some pastors have worked their entire life with a second job. They did something else. The church they pastored could never afford to support them. I think right now, every church I've ever been the head pastor of, I've never been supported by anybody, but other than the support that I raised for myself. Every church I've ever been the head pastor of, every time, it's been like, okay, figure out a way to make it work. There's been a few times on the field when I've said to myself, I wish this church could find some way to help me, because things are bad, and I don't want to tell them that things are bad. So it's just like, okay, God, you know how things are. Give creativity, give wisdom. I think more than money, I need wisdom with my money. And we'll get into that next Monday about how do you do that. But the number one complaint of many pastors, and I hear this all over the place, is that, okay, if I didn't have to work, I'd be more effective as a pastor. That's not true. It's not true. It's like people say to me, if Jesus Christ was on the earth, everyone would get saved. Well, he was on the earth and they didn't get saved. Just because that's your provision, is your call limited to your provision? If I had more money, if the church paid me more money, if I didn't have to work at all, but maybe in the working, that's part of my ministry. Maybe in the working, that's what God is working in my life, and maybe through my job, God uses me in a different way. I got to be careful that I don't cripple the church with my own financial needs, and there's a balance to that. I think churches can do something. I think some churches are indifferent, and we got to be creative and careful that we don't say, okay, he's got a job, he doesn't need us. So there's a balance with that, and that's the leadership of the church to see that and to figure that out. But that's a huge issue. That's a major issue, particularly in church planting pastors in the first 5 years. They're struggling, they're hustling, they're working hard, they've got a wife, they've got kids, they've got bills. At the same time, they're trying to pastor a church, and it's very difficult. There is no set answer for that, but I would say, are you called? Whether you've got 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, are you called? Okay, in the call, in the greatest provision in your calling is the leading of the Holy Spirit and the wisdom that he gives. That's the greatest provision. So I guess I would say I really feel like in the uniqueness of every situation, there's wisdom from God for that. But that complaint doesn't go away. I got guys, even now in different parts of the world, it's like, Pastor, I wish I had more money. I wish I had more money. every pastor wishes he had more financial resources. But God is, it's interesting in the Bible concerning money. There aren't a lot of verses in the Bible about making money. 60% of the verses in the Bible about money talk about spending it, not about making it and not about managing it. Over 60% of every verse in the Bible on money talks about giving it away. Because I don't think God's focus was on us getting it as much as he was focused on us giving it and how we give it. So I'm not going to spend so much attention on how I'm going to make it. I mean, it's a necessity. It's a resource. I want to be responsible for it, but it shouldn't be my focus. So that's my thoughts on that. Well, ladies, mission field, here we are, finances.
Hey, we brought up the subject money today.
Yeah.
We talked about it. And go over those 4 points
I'll
you
give
gave
those
again.
again.
Because missionaries, you can take these to God and, develop yourself in these areas. Just think about these.
Let's do it real quick. Okay, share your vision with your family, with your friends. Share your vision. Who cares about politics? Who cares about sports? Share your vision. Newsletters are part of the way to share your vision. Blogs, emails, everything you're doing, share your vision. Share your vision. Get the word out. Half your friends don't know what you're doing for God. You only talk to your friends when something bad is happening. Oh, I'm going through a trial. Share your vision, number one. Number two, consider options, employment, business. Consider creative ways to raise funds, to earn money. That's on the table. It's always got to be on the table. Because you're never going to have enough support, so you're always trying to raise support. You never want to get comfortable, like I don't want to raise any more support, because you know what the future has. You're always raising. Number three, have a budget. Adjustable, but have a budget, because it creates boundaries in how you raise money, what you need, and also how you spend it. We'll talk about that next Monday. And number four, understand there's going to always be this challenge in your walk with God concerning finance, between the opportunity of faith versus the responsibility of stewardship. I want to be careful that I don't want to be overly concerned. I want to have both. The Spirit gives me the balance. There might be times in my walk with God when I'm really living by faith. I'm going to this conference and the money's not there. I'm believing God. And then there's sometimes I got to say, I'm not going because I got responsibilities. I got to pay for things, and God has just said it's not there for me, so that's not there. I don't want to be reckless. I want to be Spirit-led. So next week, how to manage what God brings. Stewardship. Managing my support next week. Can't wait. Hope to see you there soon. God bless you. And Pastor Gary, any last words as we close?
No, I love that we brought up this subject today. This makes me think. And I just want to say again, the missionaries that I spoke to, I was broken after each one I talked to about the intimacy that God has used the intimacy God has brought into their lives through finances. It has caused incredible growth, and the spirituality that surrounds it has just spawned an incredible vision for people in their lives, for others. So thank you for how you're living. We can't give you support, but we're giving you spiritual support. I mean, it was like, gold and silver we don't have, but such as we have, we give you, and we're believing that we have a mighty God.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, guys, thank you. See you next Monday. Managing money next week. Manage.